Welcome, everybody. What have we got here? Let me see. I'm going to have to turn that. Oh, no, I'm going to have to shut the door. Just bear with me for 1 minute. Not something you usually have to do. Not something you usually have to do in England is to watch out for the sun. I think the sun up here was Tuesday and Wednesday last week. Anyway. My name's John Farrell. I'm the host of the podcast, Thinking Part of Sports. We had a really interesting chat last Sunday, on values and the importance of values in a team, in a sports situation, from the coach's perspective. All of this values, beliefs that we have, how they create the culture. This is not unique to sports. Business, the same theory runs exactly the same. I love sports because it's life compressed into 90 minutes or 80 minutes or 5 days, depending on what sport you play. And so it all happens at once. But the same dynamic, the same systems are in place when we're in business. So this is not a particular discussion on sports. And the emphasis last week in a business, it'd be the person who leads, the leader. Now, that may not necessarily be the boss, the CEO, the person that sits in the big chair. It's the leader. On the sports field, it would normally be the coach. But sometimes the more established older players come in as senior players and they can affect the culture as well. I think in a sports team, it really behooves the coach to step out and understand the culture that he's trying to create in that team. And of course, the first step there is recognizing all the stuff that he brings. And that is really where the self-awareness starts to come in. So what are the coach's values? What are the coach's beliefs? Why are these important? Because people do what you do far more than they listen or hear what you say. The All Blacks, the New Zealand rugby team, have a great line. Better people make better All Blacks, and that line can be taken across in any area, whether it's a sports team or a business. Better people make better parents. Better spectators make better spectators. The point of it is that it's what you do. It's who you are. It's who you are when the lights are out, when you're standing in front of the mirror. That's who you are. And a coach, because they have that influence over the wider team, it's so much more important for them to step up and actually grasp a hold of this. Understand that who they are is going to have a massive influence on that culture. And just this week, so we're right into the middle of the cricket season, the summer sports here in the Northern Hemisphere, the NFL, the Hockey League. The NFL, the football in America, is just starting to wind up. The transfers are coming in. In rugby, they're starting to move into the Southern Hemisphere round of internationals. So New Zealand, Australia, Argentina, South Africa play. For the New Zealand rugby team, it's fascinating. A lot of the culture, there's been quite a few books written on the culture, and a lot of the culture has been developed around what they value as a team, as an entity, as a presence. And that was up until a couple of weeks ago when they lost a few matches, and now that's it's breaking apart. And some people are just going to be able to step up and do it. Some people are going to struggle to do it. So it'll be interesting to watch the New Zealand rugby team and see how they deal with this pressure on the culture. Because when the culture isn't there, the team starts to fracture, because values, of which culture is based in, values aren't something you can touch. They're not something you can physically measure. They're really a concept. And unfortunately, people tend to see contradictions of the values rather than the values. So as soon as the pressure comes on, social media especially comes on, these values can be put under scrutiny and pressure. And that's when you really see the team step up. So let's talk a little bit about values. I'm just going to share my screen here. Let's talk a little bit about values. We talked about this last week, but I just wanted to go over it again. So this week is more about culture within a sports team rather than values. Last week was about values. So this is why values. But first of all, let's take a little step back into values here. Let's see if I can do this the right way. There we go. So beliefs are concepts that we hold to be true. Things that we believe are true. Now, values are ideas that are important to us. So in a sports team, what's important to us? Now, I talked last week at length about assumptions. So usually what happens with a company, with a business, with a sports team is those values will be dictated to the team. So what do we hold important? We hold diversity as being important. Now, if you're familiar with Australian Rugby League, the NRL, one of the teams there really came a cropper this week. They decided that on the strip they're going to paint the rainbow colours in recognition of the diversity that the club holds. But this is a classic example of the management just making a decision without discussing with the team. Now, they have a lot of Pacific Islands players who have been brought up in extremely religious Christian beliefs, backgrounds. That's their whole life. Now, and there's been a clash because the management have dictated the values onto the team. And the team, so the management assumed that this would be okay, diversity's in, this is what we're doing in Australia. And a lot of the team, while they hold the team values highly, their family values, their religion, they hold higher. That's a whole interesting sort of diverse segue there. Almost, I just want to go down a little bit. Is the fact that Pacific Islanders, Asians, my experience across Asia is that they hold the family much stronger to the forefront than we do in the West. So it's all about family. I was going to say Sam Kano. Kano was one of the New Zealand rugby forwards, and he was right at the start of this extended period of wins. Very good player. But when he was asked what he valued most, assuming it would be the team, he said, "It's the family. I play for my family." He was in his mid-30s at this stage. So he valued the family above anything else. Now, this team in Australia made the mistake, management made the mistake of assuming, making an ass out of both of us, that the team would just follow suit, and the team didn't. A lot of the team have withdrawn, and they didn't actually play this weekend. So really important for a coach to, first of all, understand their values, what they hold to be true, what they hold to be important, and then be able to transfer those values that sit with them. Because remember, people recognize what you do, not what you say more. So they have to be aligned. The coach's values and beliefs have to be aligned with the club, with the team. But then the coach needs to be at an awareness level of the rest of the team, each of the individual players in the team. Where are they going to sit with this? Now, something like those shirts, it strips with the NRL team in Australia. A quick discussion with the team. Just having a quick discussion would have, oh, gee, we need to actually look at this and be careful about this, because from putting a multicolored stripes on the shirt, they've bloated us up into a huge problem for the team, for the management, because now they really have egg on their face. They claim diversity, but when it came down to the crunch, the club's sort of split in two. Really important that the coach, the management in that state have their finger on what's going on. So values are key. What we hold to be important when we're looking at how is the culture of the club going to run? So if we just look down those lines, values govern the way that we behave. So what we hold to be important is the way we behave. And I've said it before, we don't see people's values, their ethics, their beliefs, their emotions. We see their behavior. The behavior is what we see on the outside. The person is not their behavior. So much more going on. And for me, working with coaches, is the important part, that they're recognizing the behavior and then being able to tap into what's going on for that player. Being able to put aside their stuff, their values, beliefs, ethics, morals, whatever, and recognize the players and either bring them back on board or address it. They can't just leave it fester, or you know, if you don't deal with misaligned values, assumptions on both sides, it can end in like it did for the NRL team on the weekend with half the team not playing. So values dictate how we behave. Now, if I have these dictated to me as a player, if I'm told these are what the values are for the team and they don't meet my values, there's a misalignment. Again, in the NRL team, it's just a classic example this week. It wasn't why I was going to speak about it, but it's come up. You end up with players behaving and playing, but not quite, because there's an unconscious almost misalignment. They're not comfortable with what's going on. In the NRL's case, the players just didn't want to play. So they were more comfortable being off the field. Obviously, they probably lose pay, or creates all sorts of other problems. And that's an extreme perspective. That's the behavior that we see. They didn't play. Now, if there's a misalignment, there are values. It can create tension, it can create problems with communication. A team has to interact, they have to gel as a group to get into that group flow where there's just this unverbalized almost connection between that group that are playing on the field. There has to be almost an unconscious communication, and this starts right down at this values beliefs level. And beliefs values determined by our attitudes and our opinions. And this is why learning before a company comes in and dictates, these are the values we're going to have for the company. How many times have you seen sort of companies, fast food companies, producing food that's good for your health? Well, it's almost a juxtaposition. A fast food company that produces food that's good for your health, we don't really believe them. So do I believe them? Because fast food and health, they don't quite match, they don't quite meet. So do we believe them? What's going on? So it's really important for a coach to understand the dynamic that's happening in a team. And it starts down at his or hers beliefs and values, so that they can then put together their concept of the culture. What is the team culture? What is it going to be for the season? And then discuss, not dictate, discuss with the players what's going to happen. Well, beliefs and emotions drive our behavior. Values guide our decisions. The values are going to guide the culture of the club. And the beliefs, the emotions, especially the behavior, will put some life into the values. But those values that we hold with the team, that the coach holds, that the team holds, will be seen in the results. They'll be seen in the decisions they make on the field. Do they exemplify those values on the field? Do they exemplify them off the field? You know, better people make better players. It's not on the field for 90 minutes. It's life. There was a huge pro in England a few years back when Ben Stokes, the cricket opening, I think it was opening batsman, he got caught in a fight outside a nightclub, and that overplayed into his game. Now, he subsequently it got thrown out, but it affected his whole game. Is that the sort of person you want representing the country? And then you have other people. There was just this weekend, you've had the GP, Sail GP, these 50 Sail GP 50s, these boats, these catamarans that literally fly on the water. They fly about 1.5 meters above the water. They're racing around Plymouth Sound. And Sabine Ainsley is the English skipper of the boat that's competing for the America's Cup that this weekend raced in that race. But last season, and they're doing 50, 60, 70 kilometers an hour. So when they have an accident that's serious, he, of course, an accident with the Japanese boat. And immediately and these are high-tech boats, you don't want to give your secrets away, but immediately he gave his boat to the Japanese, the boat that he hit, and they couldn't race anymore. So you have that sort of person. At moral, ethical level, he's doing what he did. Now, who do you hold in more esteem? Someone that's willing to give away their secrets, their high-tech secrets, or someone that gets themselves in court because of a fight in a bar outside the game? So, it's not what you say, it's what you do. They're both two examples of the values, the ethics, the morals that those athletes held. And it's not something that the behavior is something we see, it's something that maybe come up from emotions, but where do they come from? It's the values that we hold. Those values that we hold are created by our environment. They're not held the same from when we're very young. They mold, they change, they mold around the environment we're in, but a lot of those moral character values were started when we were really young. We grew up, we moved through different environments, we had different mentors. It really affects the way that we are as a person. So it's really important to look at your own values. If they're wrong, if they're misaligned, if they don't fit into society, then this is the future. I like to say the world's a mirror. What you put out is going to come back to you. What are your values? What are you seeing in the world? Whatever you're seeing in the world is what's happening inside. You have to live to your values. If not, then your decisions are going to be misaligned. So really important to look at values. I just wanted to touch here a little bit more business orientated than sports teams, but there's a difference between a learning culture where we almost dictate and a coaching culture. Now, the coaching sense here is a business sense, is in the business sense, but the same dynamic works in a sports team. The coach in the team is coaching the players. He's coaching the players on the mental skills level, as well as the technical and the physical. Whatever he does, is what they're noticing, what the athletes are noticing, and this is what he's coaching them. If he's shouting and screaming and getting annoyed at the other players, then that's what they do. If he's interacting with all the players, he has a great relationship with the players, maybe even their families, then how's that going to affect the team? The team is going to be more connected with each other because the coaches. So the first difference in a learning culture is when you're dictating, you're telling. Now, whatever level you're at, there'll be certain skills as a coach, sports team, as a coach, you're teaching them, you're telling them the skills, but there should also be the discussion because you really don't know where the players are coming from. They might not quite get it. Some of them will learn really fast. Some of us learn by images and pictures. Some of us learn by feeling, sound. There's all sorts of different learning styles. The education system teaches us one way. Lots of people don't succeed, not because of them, it's because the way that they process and think and learn it doesn't fit with the education system. Within a business, these changes are happening really fast now. You can't dictate to people. It's more just bringing them in, asking them. Now, you don't have to. This is to be successful. Knowledge and skills. Coaching in a team, in a sports team, is the physical, the mental, the knowledge, the skills, the physical, the technical, is the knowledge and skills, but there's also the mental side of the game. I consider it to be a huge chunk of the game. Your players get stuck in the past. What happened yesterday? What happened when they lost in the game last week? If they're stuck back there, then how are they going to perform today? If they're worried about getting benched or getting relegated in the future, neither things they have any control over changing, how they're going to perform right now in the moment. And right now in the moment is when you want them teaching, when you want them playing to their fullest potential. So yes, while there's knowledge and skills to pass on to players, there's also the mental coaching side of it. Coaching and mentoring, we've talked about that, the training. The appraisal is fascinating, and feedback. One of the things that I'm quite aware of is lots of teams will talk about the mistakes they made, the failures that they had. Monday morning debrief was all about the things we did wrong. Where your focus goes, your energy goes. You're focusing on the mistakes. Next weekend, what do you focus on? You're focusing on the mistakes. So instead of calling them weaknesses, great ideas just as a coach is just to even look at the language that you're using, change the words you're using, change the language. Instead of, in business, instead of calling it the SWOT model. So all players, all employees will have strengths, weaknesses, they'll have opportunities in a project, they'll have opportunities and they'll have threats. On the field, you'll have the same. You'll have the team's strengths, their weaknesses, the opportunities, how are we going to take them? And the threats, how do we measure this team? But instead of calling them weaknesses, why can't we call them work-ons, things that we need to work on? So Monday morning debrief is what we did well and things that we need to work on. Where's the energy? Well, a lot of the energy is on what we did well. And if you get what you did well better, that's going to be just as effective if the things that you're working on. So changing the language. And really important in training and feedback in a company is to get the feedback right. And I could do a whole session just on feedback, but the thing is, it needs to be timely because feedback needs to be specific. There's no point in talking generalizations. Appraisals, you did well, doesn't mean anything to anybody. This is what you did well this weekend. That particular pass you did went really well. How many times can you do that, and how could you change that, and how could you upscale it, upgrade it? How could you, all sorts of questions you can ask it, but in the moment, because then they can go out, the players can go out and they can try that. Employees in a company are the same, they can go out and they can try these things straight away. Giving appraisal after 3 months, 6 months is all very well if it's done properly, if it's done well, but it's generalized again. Can't be specific. If it is, it's what you did yesterday, not what you did 5 months ago. Position till the next mistake, open communication. Communication is key. And that really comes down to the personality and a lot of the values are unconscious values and the values that the coach may have in communicating. Good coaches communicate well with people. Good players on the field communicate all the time. But communication is can be really difficult, really challenging if you don't have the right mindset. But that learning culture, when you're dictating values, when you're controlling what's happening, the players are going to be worried that they hold their position next time, make a mistake. The worst situation they can be, they make a mistake, they make the same mistake again, but then they're going to make it again. Study coming out with the NFL, that a player that's made 2 mistakes is way more likely to make a 3rd mistake in a game because then they start getting worried about getting benched. Where's their focus? In the moment, on their fullest potential playing the game, or worried about being benched? It's a mindset. Coach needs to pick that up and be able to deal with it off the field at a later stage. Communication. And with the values, so values are something with the team. So first of all, the coach needs to understand his values, where he sees the team going. And then in that discussion, we'll go on to some of the questions in a minute. To create that culture, what is the focus for the team? What's the outcome for the season? Now, the outcome for the season is to win the championship. Well, that's mostly out of your control. Other teams are going to be stronger. You might get the wrong ref. It might be wet. And when you have your easy matches, you can't play them. They get postponed. And where I live, it could snow. All sorts of things outside your control. So is that a good value to have, that you nail into the staff and the athletes and they don't get it and it all goes to pot? Or are you looking after the well-being? Now, well-being with athletes is to make sure that they're comfortable, they're happy with where they're performing. Goals are something that I don't set it for the end of the season. Goals are things that I will set every day, but at least week to week. Looking after the well-being of an athlete can be shortening those goals down. So what are you doing this week better than you did last week? What are you doing this week to improve next week? So they're doing a short-term goal setting. There'll be bigger outcomes involved. Those short steps. So, and well-being is more than just the physical, technical, physical abilities. It's also, penalty takers. How was the penalty? What was happening? What distractions were coming up? Because any distraction with a player is going to drag them out of the game. They're not going to be playing at their fullest potential. And all of this stuff in here, so asking the players how the physical training is going, how the logistics are going, looking at the mindset with the players, coaching and mentoring them on a technical, on a mental skills basis, giving them feedback constantly, communicating well, and looking after them as people is creating the culture. Now, as a coach, if you force these things, if these are things that come up, and you've got them written on a piece of paper, and yeah, that's a good value to have, and I will impart it onto the team. I'll sort of push it onto the team with a bit of discussion. It won't really gel. And well, it might not end in conflict. I hope it doesn't end in conflict. It still will affect that communication. And when a team's binding together, you have a team connection. You have a group of individuals that are playing as one. And the sum of the individuals should equate to more than individuals individually. So this is why we look at this mindset for coaches, because they're the ones driving this. They're the ones pulling it all out. Alex Ferguson used to meet each of the players individually away from the game when they signed up before the game, sit down, maybe take them home. And he used to know their immediate families. So he was creating that bubble, which created the menus that we had in the past, that menu team we had in the past. It was really strong culture within the team, driven by him, driven by Sir Alex Ferguson. Other parts of it as well, but little subtle parts that he put into place really gives the team, the team. And that was the group of the golden generation with all those fantastic players that never really achieved much. Gareth Southgate, created by looking at the culture, going into the depth of the culture more, by looking at the value, the mental side behind the game, has created a lot different team. So this is why we do it now. What can we do? We talk about business here, this quote here, that we talk about business. And again, this is the same with sports. Sports has changed. The world's changing. I heard a great quote the other day. Everything seems to be going faster and faster, whether it's technology or information that I'm getting or cars on the road even. Everything seems to be going faster. And there was a great quote last week I was reading where life will never be as slow as it is right now. It's never going to stay this slow. It's going to increase. And that can be the cars on the road, but it's also the mental processing, the mental pressures that we're under. Because everything's going a lot faster. And now we've just come out of COVID, living in fear, worrying about paying for the gas, the fuel bill, all sorts of stuff is putting much more pressure on us. The coach needs to be aware of this mental health, mental fitness angle for players. But also, we have a millennial, we have a younger generation, especially with athletes, because they're going to be that younger generation. As a coach, you might be a millennial, but you usually be a little bit older, and maybe the next generation. The generation of employees or players is more focused now on self-development. It's the second biggest growth industry in America. Coming out of mental health, people are like, well, this is not right. I can't, I need to do something else. The number of coaches, the amount of self-development that's happening now. There's a training coming up. We're coming into August now. There's a training coming up next week. A Zoom training coming up next week. Well, I estimate there will be over 1 million people on that 5-day training. 1 million people. Well, I don't know how they get all these people on Zoom, but they do. It's fascinating when you watch the presenters. They have a bank of television screens, monitors in front of them, and they must have, I don't know, 50, 60 monitors to give them that sense of an audience. As coaches, we need to be able to recognize that this is a generation that's much more, the millennial generation. Our athletes are much more aware of their mental fitness, much more aware of self-development, much more aware of the bigger world. It's different culture. And it's constantly changing. As I said, things will never be as slow as they are right now. So it's changing. It's a lot faster. There's much more mental self-development happening amongst that younger generation. It's across the board. It's not just them. But it changes our approach to coaching, because you can't go in and tell people that are doing self-development. You've got to work with them and help them recognize their self-development. Now, ultimately here, you're working on having them reach their potential. Physical and mental are not enough to do physical and mental are not enough to get to that full potential. Their head's got to be in the right place. What happens above the shoulders dictates what happens below the shoulders. Mental fitness, self-development. It's needed more than ever. All right. So if we look at values, and we're looking at values because this is getting the team to connect. Now, David Snowden, he famously quoted that it's almost impossible to measure culture in it while it's going on. In hindsight, it's great, but not when it's happening. So, and you will have a culture in a team. Whether you like it or not, it's there. It's going to happen. It always has, but always will do. Good coaches will take control of it and actually dictate it, mold it, get it sort of work on having the culture help them, help the team. And it's a really good start now at the start of the season, this preseason stage where they're starting to, the coach is starting to look at his own values, his own outcome for the season, but also at this time of the year to actually discuss it with the team, with the older players, with the whole team, the team as a whole. New players coming in, they're just going to, normally they just slide into what's happening because no one really talks to them. So, and this is a list here looking at values of if the things that you can discuss as a group with the team. So are the mission, the outcome for the season aligned? Does the coach, the management, and the players, are we all on the same ballpark? Not every team can win the championship. Some teams will be hot favourites. Some teams will be hot favourites to get relegated. So everybody wants to win the championship, and that needs to be a focus. But what's realistic that all the team can get on board with? If some of them aren't supporting it, if some of them are sort of like, oh yeah, that the coach needs to be self-aware enough to pick up on that and work with them on changing that alignment of mission outcome for the season. Everybody needs to be on the same page. They need to have common goals. And that goal may be every team member is going to measurably do this much every week. Improvement is difficult to measure. If I could do 10 press-ups today and 12 tomorrow and 15 in the middle of the week and 20 by next weekend, that's measurable, but is that actually going to help? Possibly if I start the season, I'm pretty unfit. Yes, absolutely. Improving the techniques, changing the style, being able to slot into a B plan. That's not physical. That's moving into technical. So there's all these things that need to be discussed, brought into alignment, so that, again, everybody is on the same page. And then, of course, as I said, they're measuring the outcomes. How are you going to measure it? You can measure press ups. You can measure uh, the runs that you're doing. You can measure results, but you might play the best team in the league and lose, but lose by 1 point. Last year, they beat you by 50 points. Is that a good result? For sure, that's a result. So how do we measure them? And in that case, making sure that evaluating I've got the evaluating correcting challenges is congruent. Everybody on the team agrees with the measurement on it. Again, press ups is easy to measure, but it's actually the results. At the end of the day, if you've got a season, you've got 15 games, how many are you aiming to win? What are the games you're trying to win? You know, break it down. There'll be a few top games that you want to win. Maybe they should be the focus. You build up to those. Different cups. There's so many different dynamics there that you don't need to have this great big discussion about it, but everybody needs to be on the same page. These are the focuses for the season. And I think these, in the group meetings, the team meetings, it's really important to step in and identify and make sure that the players establish their identities. New players coming in need to know where they stand. They're really talking to the rest of the team, not sort of slotting in quietly and trying to fit in, which is what normally happens. Understand the boundaries, what they can do, what they can't do. Make sure that they're respected, that they respect all the little unsaid, unspoken, immeasurable sort of. This is what's so difficult about culture. It's not something you can put your hand on. But if everybody's expressing who they are, they know their identity, they know how they fit into the team, they have the right relationships, they can communicate well. And there's so much of that dynamic that's up to the coach. A lot of the players, physical, the technical, it's easy to measure, and then you can have a progression, right? Each week you can check in, right? How are we progressing with this? The mental side of the game is where I think the real pressure is on the coach. And this is why I work with coaches to make sure that they understand themselves. They know where their values are. They know what their outcomes are. They've got to that point with themselves that they can measure it, and therefore they can understand the players where they are. No use coming in with all my stuff as a coach when you've got individual, quite different players. Now, you're creating a team culture, but even each of those players will come in with their own culture. Even if it's a player you've got a team up north and you have someone come up from London, and you speak the same language, but the culture is going to be quite different. Will they fit in? Technically, physically, they might have the skills to fit in, but if they don't fit into the team, not going to work. And then as you get higher in the leagues, you may have people coming in from overseas, completely different cultures, which is what happened earlier this week with the NRL team, where you had Pacific Islanders coming in who'd grown up in Australia. They weren't coming from a different country, but they'd grown up within that country, within their own culture. I remember years ago sitting on a plane with a young woman from the States to England. She was 18, 19. So I was chatting to her. And I could barely understand her accent. And I couldn't understand how she'd grown up in Australia. She'd always lived in Australia, in Sydney. And she was Spanish. And that was the group that she stayed in. Sydney has something like 120 or more defined ethnic groups within the city. Well displaced. I had another young Thai girl that went in the company with me, and her English was passable. Knew nothing about Australia, but she got a degree in Australia, because in Australia, when she was down there doing her degree, she lived with a Thai family, she worked at the Thai restaurant, she ate Thai food, and she went to university. So she never really experienced Australia. You have a sports team in Sydney, you've got those sort of different cultures. You've got a sports team in London, you've got a similar sort of thing. Quite different cultures coming in. And the coach needs to recognize this to stop conflict, to just, on that level, to stop conflict within the team, to make sure the communication's there. But we're talking here about team culture. Actually building a network so the players are all, that they all have the same vision for the team. They all want to win for the team. I think competing and winning, or developing individuals is a fascinating one. We all want to win. That's what you're playing the sport for, to win the championship. But how do the players measure that? I know with the elite teams that have brought mental health, mental fitness coaches in, that's a full-time job. You may have 30 players on the squad. It's a lot of individual work to understand where they are, each player, to help them deal with the mental side of what they're dealing with. So when you don't have the opportunity of having a mental skills coach on board, that's a lot more load on the coach. And I think these things come up, values, and this is a good time to discuss it at the start of the season, pre-season, when it's a little bit more relaxed. You've got the Community Shield, which Liverpool just won. And that's the time to do it, because when the games start playing, when you start to get into those games, you don't have time to assess this stuff you're playing. And the point there is, the timing there is to be in the moment, to be playing to fullest potential possible in the moment, not worrying about what happened and what's going to happen, being in the moment. So, and this is a list here of some of the things that we could look at, start to build that culture at the start of the season. And I think it's fascinating. I work with coaches. I deliver a 6-month course that covers, because the challenge with individuals are that, what is going to be incredible for this person will just go over the head of this person. So as a coach, you might be great at relations, interacting, communicating with people, but the emotion side lets you down. Or it might be just the goal setting, because you set goals as a team, you set goals for the individuals, or they set goals themselves, and then something outside their extrinsic goals, something outside happens and it knocks them off. Then what do you do? Their goal's taken away. What happens? So as a coach, as anybody, but in particular here we're focusing on coaches or business leaders, each individual business leader can have so many different attributes that they need to work on. I run a 6-month course, and every 2 weeks we focus on a different module, a different area, and it takes time to change habits. You can change a habit in the moment, but to embed it in, to really get it in depth, it really takes a community, a supportive community that's going to help you, support you, to actually understand what those values, those beliefs are, and then support you to actually go through, because we're talking about changing the life decisions here. So if that's something, drop me a line, DM me if that's something that you're interested in. It's that 6-month course. It looks at lots of different aspects of the personality, the character that you are. But here we're looking at the values. So the coach needs to step up and have that at this stage in the season, grow, develop, become aware of the individual players. How can he mold the best the team culture? There'll be other influences, I said, but really it's the coach that has the biggest effect on really what's happening with culture. I don't want to go on too long. I think that's just about it for me. So in summing up, culture is based in the values, and it's not what you say, it's what you do. So a coach should be really understanding their values, their beliefs, how they relate, how they express their emotions, all of that stuff put in together, and then they can put together their values, their outcomes, their vision for the club, for the season, for the team, on a lower level, the individuals within that team, so that they can recognize what's happening for the players, and then the best way to help them. Because if you're raising the potential of most of the team, you're raising the overall team. And because those team members are increasing their potential, ultimately here it's to increase individuals' potential so that the team's results at the end of the day, the game wins, grow. And when the coach can actually understand his, so that he can recognize the players, then he's going to have much more fun. I mean, it's much more fun when you can support the mental side, the mental skills side. of the player, so they can do right in the physical, the technical, and the mental side. So if that sounds like something interesting, sounds like something that would interest you, DM me, send me a message, and we can have a chat and see how this all fits into the bigger scheme of getting that team, or getting your team, to their full potential. Thanks very much. I'm John Farrell, and let me just stop sharing here. I'm John Farrell, and this is the thinking side of sports. That mental skills, mental fitness, mental agility, if you like, which is a big part of any game, whether you're playing in the championship or you're playing Sunday football. It just makes it that much more enjoyable when you can focus on the game. You know, if you're playing golf and you're worried about the wind or the water on the side, or you hooked it last time, you just get annoyed because you do the same thing again. If you can hit the ball perfectly once, why aren't you doing it all the time? Because our head gets in the way. We start to lose confidence. We start to overthink. We start to bring in all sorts of variables. We're not playing in the moment. Really, playing in the moment is what it's all about. DM me if you're interested in talking about this any further. I've got a course coming up in a couple of weeks, so I'd love to have a chat to you about that. Talk soon, same time next week. Bye for now.